Good morning and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy here, the Forex Amateur, and welcome back to another weekly outlook video. So as you know, on a Monday morning, I like to break down my outlook of the markets and what I basically forecast seeing in the markets this week, and obviously how I will be reacting and taking trade decisions based on that. Before I get into the video, I just want to throw in my disclaimer. Remember, I'm not qualified nor licensed to offer financial investment or trading advice. Everything I speak about on these videos is purely my own opinion. I do not recommend a specific trade or action. So if you do go into trading financial instruments, remember, do it with cash that you are willing to risk, and also do your own research because it is risky out here, and the more you know, the better it is for you. So let's get straight into the video. As you know, I like to start with the dollar index and the currency that I do focus on, and then we'll move over to the volatility indices market. So on the monthly chart, not really much that we can speak about in here, right? We have spoken about this chart quite thoroughly over the past couple of weeks that I have spoken. And we do know that we are overall long-term bearish on the dollar, right? So we've got some clear breaks of structure. We've got some definitive lower highs and lower lows being formed after these breaks of structure, right? So we're clearly in a bearish market in here. What I am looking at is long-term downside objectives is obviously this first level in here, which is my pivot point. It's the yellow line that I generally look for a bounce from. And then the next target will be down in here in the 88.10 region, and that would be my downside targets. So as we take that information now over to the weekly chart, we then begin to form a bias on this, and we begin to see it sort of translating into price action as well. We can see that this market in here from here, this was the last lower high that was formed on the monthly that broke that lower low after this break in structure in here, right? So we know that this is a lower low, this is a lower high, this is a break in structure. We can see that this is a strong push to the downside, and we can see that this market sort of contracted and pulled back up into this area in here. And now we can see it's starting to push again to the downside. The assumption obviously would be that we would see this market come back to this low as we in a lower low, lower high, lower low formation. We would expect a lower high and then go into a lower low formation thereafter, right? So looking at this, obviously we are overall bearish. This is still a much higher time frame. We're simply trying to form and understand what's happening in this market. We cannot ignore the fact that this is a key level in this market that the market is currently reacting from. So we'd most likely see maybe some sort of a pullback into the around these areas in here before we see this market continue back to the downside. But let's drop down a bit further into the daily chart, and let's start to talk about what we're going to be looking to see in this market this week. So very simply, we can see that, let me just actually grab my pen. Okay, so we can see right in here, this is that weekly last lower high that we see on the weekly that was formed right here. That's that weekly lower high, right? We can see that right there after that pullback. We've marked it on the daily, and you can see that that's the last weekly lower high. We can see a break of structure in here on the daily, right? Because this was the low that created this higher high, right? Higher low, higher high. We can see that being a push to the downside, breaking structure, forming this lower low, and then coming up and forming a lower high, right? So we now see that, okay, the market has moved over to bearish on the daily as well. We can see that we formed a lower high, and we formed a lower low here. We've also broken structure, formed another lower low in here, right? So currently looking at the daily chart, what do we have? Now, we can see that this market has basically broken below this low in here, right? So what I would expect right now is I'm looking at this level right in here. I can see that this market failed to break below, and then it came back in with an impulse and a nice big strong candle to the upside from there, right? We can see that we've got three sort of hits to the downside in here, which what happened after breaking the structure in here. So this for me is a sign that we would most likely see this market either reverse and break this high, or reverse and come back and retest something in around this area in here. So what I'm currently focused on right now is I'm looking at this market most likely getting back into here. But once it does break above this high in here, I will then be looking for some sort of a pullback into around these areas here. and then we look to take this market as high as it will most likely go into around that area perhaps, and perhaps higher than that if possible. So overall, looking at the dollar index for this week, I am overall bullish on the dollar index. However, it has not basically shifted structure yet to the bullish side. So what I will be looking at is something perhaps maybe on the 4-hour chart. Let's see, coming off this daily low on the 4-hour chart, we can see that we've respected this high and we've given us a nice big candle to the upside, which has broken structure right in this area here as well, right? So it has basically given us a push to the upside and it's broken structure to the upside, showing us that there is a willingness to go higher. I would expect the market to come back below here and then perhaps start to give us some sort of structure to the upside and start to push higher from around that point. That is obviously if we can look at this as a valid break of structure to the upside. Overall, looking at the dollar index, still looking at long term to the upside for the remainder of this week, or for the longer part of this week before we see it then reverse and continue back to the downside, because remember, we are overall bearish on this market. So my targets for here, my overall targets would be just above this high in here. And if it does then want to continue thereafter, I'll be willing to hold the trade. If not, however, this will be my overall target, and then I'll expect something like this for this market then to continue back to the downside from around there, right? So that's very clear. Let's move over to the Euro USD. So Euro USD on the monthly chart, we have also covered this quite extensively as well. You can see we've got break of structure there. We've got another break of structure here where we've broken above this higher high. We've formed a higher low, higher high. We've come back and we've respected this previous higher low. So very clearly we are in a bullish market in here, coupled with this break of market structure, higher high formation with another break. We've also got the market pulling back and respecting the previous higher low that was formed in this market. So we are expecting to see this market continue bullish. Some of my upside targets will be this previous high and then this yellow block in here, which is what I call the money zone. And that is generally where I see reversals happen from around there. So we can see that, okay, we're still bullish on this. We're expecting it to push a bit higher and then hit something to the upside and pull back to the downside. Looking at the weekly chart, we've basically marked the last pivot level on the weekly chart. We can see that, okay, we're looking at this point, okay, the market pushed up from here, and there was a break of structure here. If we go down to a lower time frame, we'll be able to identify it, but for now, we can't identify it on here, hence I have not marked it on the weekly chart. But we can see a very strong switch and market switching to the upside from around that area in there. Moving down to the daily time frame, let's just break this down. We can see, okay, coming off of that weekly low that we identified, we can see there's that break of structure that I spoke about on the higher time frame. You can see it very clearly in here because we've got a lower high after this, higher high, break of market structure, lower low, lower high, lower low, break of market structure to the upside, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, right? So very clearly we are in a bullish market right now. However, what I am currently looking for is I am looking to see this market sort of come back up into around this area in here. And then I'm looking to see this market slam back to the downside, right? So what have we seen on the dollar index is we want to see it come back down into around this area again and then slam to the upside, right? So looking at something like that on the Euro USD as well, we can see that we've painted the last high in here, right? So 1, 2, 3 highs is what I generally look for. And then that sort of gives you some sort of a pattern as well. So if you trade chart patterns, then you'll be looking for something like a touch in there. Maybe you're more inclined to sort of, more inclined to sort of go for like a retest entry and then start to look for the market going back to the downside to retest in around this area and then push to the upside. So very similar to what we're looking at on the dollar index. And as I always say on every single one of these videos that I do post, that the correlation between the dollar index and the Euro USD is very strong due to the weighting that the Euro has on the dollar basket of currencies, sort of basket of currencies that measure out the dollar index, right? On an intraday basis, we can see here on Euro USD that we've sort of pushed up. We've painted this high after breaking this market structure. We can see the market pull back into around here, and we can see that it's now pushing to the upside, right? Cool. So moving on. Sorry, just give me a second. Cool. So moving on, we've basically come into around that area after this pullback, and we're looking for something to the upside from around there if you look at it on the H4 chart. But let's just focus on the daily chart in here, because on the H4, it's simply going to show you the setup to go above this high and then drop down from there, because that's more or less what I'm expecting to see happening on here. So something like a pullback into around here, and then we'll see this market push back to the downside from around that area. So let's just move on from there and let's go over to the volatility indices market, and then we will be done. So let's talk about, let's see, volatility indices. Cool. Let's start with volatility 100 and look at it on the weekly chart. So volatility 100 on the weekly chart, I'm very clearly bullish on this, right? We can see this market making high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low currently, and it's currently broken above the previous high at the moment with the current weekly candle, right? Upside targets, I'm looking at this 4766 area. That's something that I am expecting it to work its way up into and then give us some sort of a consolidation here before it drops a little bit from around that area, right? So moving down, we can see that we've marked our weekly low in here, right? We're in a bullish market, so we don't need to mark the highs. We need to mark the lows because the market has to. We'll expect the market to respect those or even do their fake outs at the lows before they continue higher. So looking at the daily chart on here, we can see coming off this weekly low, we've got this push to the upside, which didn't break market structure. We've got a pullback forming a higher low, and we can see a break in market structure thereafter, right? So looking at that for now, I would like to see some sort of a pullback into around this area or even lower than that. And then I'd be looking for something around here to take this market back to the upside and then hold it for as long as it does go up, right? Remember, upside target is obviously this 4766 level that I am looking at from based on the weekly. Not really much more I can speak about on this chart. It's very straightforward what I am looking at. So looking at here on the 4-hour chart as well, we can see that coming off that daily level, we've got a break of market structure in here. We've got a higher high formed. So I will be, if this market does pull back, we will expect it to respect this range and give us some sort of a pullback into around this area in here, and then look for this market to go higher from around that area again, right? Moving on to volatility 75, we'll start from the weekly chart. I have been trading this chart since the latter part of last week. We can see that, oh, sorry, since the earlier part of last week, we can see we've got a weekly demand zone right in there, right after this previous break in market structure, higher high, higher low. We formed this base rally, breaking market structure in there. So we would at minimum expect this market to come back up into around this area before it does do whatever it is that it's willing to do, right? So what we've done in here is we've marked this high on this weekly chart, and we'll now move over to a lower time frame. So we've now come down to the daily time frame, and looking at the daily very simply, we can see coming off that weekly high, we had this push to the downside, which didn't necessarily break market structure. We've got this pullback and another push to the downside, which then broke market structure at that point. So now we've got this lower high and lower low from there marked on the daily chart. So what I will be expecting is something like that into around this area in here, and then I'll expect this to sort of maybe come back down into that area or even lower than that, somewhere around there, and then go up from there, something to that effect, right? But that's obviously much longer term, right? Because remember, we're just forecasting for this week. So I am expecting something up into around here, and then something back down from around that area, coming back into this previous low in here before we see this market move in whatever direction that it's most likely going to move in. For now, I have no long-term projections on here because I am at a bearish zone on the monthly. So I'm not really doing any long-term projections on here at the moment. But overall, I will be expecting this market to just keep making its way to the downside. Moving on to volatility 10, we'll start on the weekly chart on volatility 10 as well. We can see that we've got this 1, 2, 3 hit formation to the downside at that point there, right? So that's some sort of a pattern as well. If you trade chart patterns, you'll see we've got this breakout in here. Let me actually put a line there so it can be more visual. So you've got this breakout here. So you'll expect some sort of a retest, and you'll expect this market go to the upside, right? So looking at that, I am currently looking at sales on here, even though I'm long-term bullish on this market. To participate in this week, I'll be looking for some long-term sales from around this 86716 level, and I'll be looking to take it back down into around here before I continue looking for buys to the upside from there. Cool. So what I've marked in here is this weekly low and this break of market structure in here, showing that we are in a bullish market. When we move over to the daily chart, we can see coming off this weekly low at the bottom in here, we've got another break in market structure. We've got this strong push to the upside in here. We've got 1, 2, 3 hits to the upside. We've got this push to the upside and price coming into the zone in here. So what I will be looking for is something, some sort of maybe a consolidation, a push to the upside, and then something back to the downside from there. So overall, this is a sell zone that I am looking at currently, and I am currently looking to take this market back to the downside. So let's move over to the 4-hour chart. I don't think I have anything marked yet. On 4-hour, I have nothing marked on here. So we can see that this market started to lose momentum as it came up into this area in here. So overall from here, I am currently looking for some sort of a break below this daily level will then signify that it's going to go long term, but a break below this H4 level means that we'll then see it come back to this this daily zone right in there, right? So very straightforward week. I mean, everything is lined up pretty nicely. We're going to be looking at obviously getting in on those longer term positions, as well as getting in and out of those shorter intraday positions as well. So as always, it has been a pleasure sharing with you guys. I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading week. Next week, I'll most likely be adding some new charts maybe that we might be looking at. I'm not really sure yet, but we'll see what happens. Until next time, wishing you a blessed and profitable trading week, and I'll catch up with you guys again next time.